The office went dead silent as two uniformed officers walked straight toward my desk. Everyone's heads turned. Keyboards stopped clicking. Even the coffee machine seemed to hold its breath. "Trent Lawson?" the taller officer asked, his hand resting on his belt. My manager, Melissa Crow, stood 6 feet away with her arms crossed, watching. That faint smirk played at the corner of her lips, the one I'd seen 100 times before when she got what she wanted. "That's him," she said, her voice steady and confident. "He's the one who stole company property." My chest tightened. The words didn't make sense. "What are you talking about?" I managed to push out, my voice cracking slightly. The officer pulled out a folded document. "You're under arrest for theft of corporate equipment valued at over $5,000. Everything moved in slow motion after that. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists. My co-workers stared, some with their mouths hanging open, others quickly looking away like they'd witnessed something shameful. Melissa tilted her head slightly, her eyes tracking my every movement. "Guess IT can't fix this one," she said softly, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. They walked me through the entire office. Not the back exit. Not the side door. Straight through the open-plan workspace where 40 people sat at their desks, watching the show. My face burned. I kept my eyes down, but I could feel every stare drilling into me. These were people I'd helped for years. I'd fixed their computers at midnight. I'd recovered their lost files. I'd trained half of them when they first started. Now they watched me get arrested like I was some kind of criminal. Melissa followed behind, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She stopped near the HR manager's desk, speaking just loud enough to be overheard. "He's been acting strange for weeks. I tried to help him, but he wouldn't listen. I should have seen this coming." Her voice carried that perfect mix of concern and disappointment, like she was a caring boss dealing with a troubled employee. Outside, the patrol car sat in the visitor parking lot, its lights flashing red and blue against the glass doors. A few people from other floors had gathered near the windows, watching. I turned once before getting into the car. Melissa stood in the doorway, backlit by the lobby lights, arms still crossed. That satisfied expression hadn't left her face. That image burned itself into my brain. That was the day my life fell apart. The day I realized that loyalty meant nothing to someone who saw you as disposable. My name is Trent Lawson. I'm 34 years old, and until that morning, I was the IT lead for Ravenholt Consulting, a mid-sized financial services firm in downtown Portland. I'd worked there for 6 years, climbing from help desk support to managing the entire IT infrastructure. I'd never stolen anything in my life. Never even taken home an extra pen from the supply closet. I was the guy who stayed late to finish projects and came in early to handle emergencies. I believed that hard work mattered, that dedication got rewarded, that doing the right thing protected you. I was wrong about all of it. Sitting in that police car, hands cuffed behind my back, I replayed everything that had led to this moment. The warning signs I'd ignored. The small betrayals I'd written off. The power plays I'd been too naive to recognize. Melissa Crow hadn't just destroyed my career. She'd orchestrated my complete humiliation in front of everyone I worked with. And she'd done it with a smile. 3 months earlier, everything had seemed normal. Better than normal, actually. I just finished leading the company's biggest project in years, migrating all our servers to a new cloud infrastructure. It had taken 4 months of planning, countless late nights, and perfect execution to avoid any downtime. The CEO himself had sent an email praising the smooth transition. My team had celebrated with drinks at the bar across the street. Even Melissa had congratulated me, though her smile hadn't quite reached her eyes. "This kind of work deserves recognition," she'd said during our one-on-one meeting. "I'm recommending you for the senior IT manager position. You've earned it." I'd actually believed her. I'd gone home that night and told my girlfriend about the promotion. We'd talked about what the salary increase would mean, maybe finally saving up for a down payment on a house. 2 weeks later, the announcement came. Melissa had given the position to Chad Winters, a guy who'd been with the company for 8 months and whose biggest achievement was setting up conference room projectors. I'd once watched him unplug our main network router because he thought it was overheating. It had shut down operations for 20 minutes. Nothing personal, Melissa said when I asked about it. Her exact words had been, "You're more of a technical type, Trent. Not really leadership material. Chad has that executive presence we need for client-facing roles." Chad's executive presence consisted of wearing expensive cologne and agreeing with everything Melissa said. He knew almost nothing about actual IT systems, which meant I ended up doing his job while he took credit in meetings. It started small. I'd write detailed reports about network security improvements, and Melissa would present them to the board with Chad standing beside her. My name would get mentioned briefly at the end, if at all. Then it got worse. Melissa began forwarding my project updates to herself, then sending them to executives with her name at the top. When I pointed this out carefully, professionally, she'd acted confused. "I'm just streamlining communication," she'd said. "You still get credit where it counts." But I didn't. In meetings, she'd reference our IT strategy and the plan Chad and I developed, even though I'd written every word of it. When someone asked a technical question, she'd look at me to answer, then thank Chad for his leadership. I swallowed it all. Kept my head down. Paid my bills. Told myself it didn't matter as long as I knew the truth. That was my biggest mistake. The breaking point came when Melissa put the entire company at risk. We'd landed a major contract with a banking consortium, our biggest client ever. They needed new data management software installed, but it had to meet strict federal compliance standards for financial information security. I'd spent 2 weeks reviewing the requirements. The software needed specific encryption protocols before we could connect it to client databases. Skip those steps, and we'd be violating federal regulations. An audit could cost the company millions in fines or even shut us down. Melissa called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. "I need you to fast-track the installation," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "Client wants to go live Monday morning." "That's not possible," I explained. "We haven't completed the encryption setup. It'll take at least another week to do it right." She finally looked at me. "Then do it wrong. We'll fix it later. That's a compliance violation. If they audit us." "They won't. Stop being so rigid, Trent. Sometimes you need to take calculated risks in business." I stood there, trying to find words that wouldn't get me fired but would make her understand. "I can't do that. It's illegal." Her smile disappeared completely. "Then maybe we need to find someone less difficult." I didn't sleep that weekend. On Monday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I went over Melissa's head. I requested a meeting with Timothy Burns from HR and brought copies of everything. Melissa's emails ordering me to skip compliance steps. The federal regulations we'd be violating. The potential consequences for the company. Timothy listened carefully, taking notes on his tablet. He seemed concerned, asking detailed questions about the timeline and the specific regulations involved. "This is serious," he said when I finished. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention. We'll handle this appropriately." I felt relief for the first time in days. Someone in authority understood. The system would work. 2 days later, Melissa called me into her office. She closed the door and leaned against her desk, arms crossed. That smile was back, but colder now. "I hear you've been making accusations about me," she said, her voice soft but somehow threatening. "Going to HR behind my back. Questioning my decisions." My stomach dropped. I was trying to protect the company. "No, Trent. You were trying to undermine my authority. That's a very risky move. She picked up a pen from her desk and twirled it between her fingers. I'd watch my step if I were you. HR had told her everything. Every detail I'd shared in confidence. The next week, everything changed. An email went out company-wide from IT security, missing equipment alert, company laptop containing sensitive client data has been reported stolen. If anyone has information, please contact management immediately. I stared at the email, confused. I managed the equipment inventory. Nobody had reported any missing laptops to me. I checked the asset tracking system, everything was accounted for. 10 minutes later, Melissa called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. The entire department crowded in, along with several managers from other teams. She stood at the front, her expression grave. As you all saw in the email, we have a serious security breach, she began. A laptop with confidential client information is missing from our secure storage. She pulled up a spreadsheet on the projector. According to our logs, Trent was the last person to access the equipment room where the laptop was stored. He signed out a storage key last Thursday. Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt my face flush. That's not true. I haven't accessed the storage room in over a month. Melissa zoomed in on the log entry. There was my name, dated 6 days ago. The system doesn't lie, Trent. After the meeting, the atmosphere in the office shifted completely. Co-workers who'd been friendly for years suddenly stopped talking to me. The lunch group I usually ate with didn't invite me anymore. When I joined project channels on our messaging system, conversations would go silent or people would quickly log off. Someone wrote the word thief on my desk whiteboard in red marker. I erased it, but the next day it appeared again, this time on a sticky note attached to my computer monitor. I tried to focus on my work, but Melissa had started excluding me from meetings. Chad would get assigned to projects I'd been managing, and nobody would tell me about the transition. I'd find out when clients emailed me asking why I hadn't responded to requests I'd never received. Melissa played her role perfectly. In front of others, she acted concerned about my welfare. Trent seemed stressed lately, she'd say to other managers within my earshot. I've tried to help, but he's become very defensive. I'm worried about him. She'd even sent me an email asking if I needed to take some personal time to deal with whatever you're going through. The message was copied to HR, of course, creating a paper trail that made her look like the caring boss trying to help a troubled employee. I felt trapped. Everything I said to defend myself sounded like excuses. On Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after the laptop went missing, Melissa sent me a message, "Need your help finding an old backup drive in the storage room. Can you meet me there in 10 minutes?" Something felt wrong, but I couldn't refuse a direct request from my manager. I grabbed my keys and headed to the storage room on the basement level, where we kept old equipment and archived files. The door was already unlocked when I arrived. Melissa stood inside with 2 security guards I'd seen around the building but never talked to. "There you are," she said, her voice carrying a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. Before I could ask what was happening, one of the guards moved to a metal storage cabinet and pulled open a drawer. He reached inside and lifted out a laptop, holding it up like evidence. "Found it exactly where you said it would be, Ms. Crow," he said. Melissa shook her head slowly, her eyes on me. "In the section assigned to Trent's equipment." She pulled out her phone. "I'll call the police now." "Wait," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't put that there. I haven't been in this room." "The logs show otherwise," she interrupted. "At the police station, they put me in a small interview room that smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A detective named Pierce sat across from me, a manila folder open on the table between us. "Mr. Lawson, we have evidence that you accessed restricted data from the stolen laptop," he said, sliding a printed email across to me. "This was logged in the system." I looked at the printout. It showed my username accessing files from the missing laptop at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. But something was wrong. "That's impossible," I said, pointing at the timestamp. I was in a video meeting with our West Coast team at that exact time. There are logs of the Zoom call, probably 20 people who can verify it. Pierce leaned back in his chair, studying me. "So you're saying someone used your credentials?" "Yes. Someone who has administrator access to modify system logs." I met his eyes. "My manager, Melissa Crow, has that access. She's the only other person in the company who does." He made a note but didn't respond. They kept me there for 4 more hours, asking the same questions in different ways, trying to catch me in contradictions. Finally, they let me make a phone call. I called my younger brother Marcus. He drove down from Seattle and posted bail at midnight. I walked out of that building feeling like a completely different person. Marcus drove me back to my apartment without saying much. He knew me well enough to recognize when I needed silence. When we got inside, he made coffee while I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. "You want to talk about it?" he finally asked, handing me a mug. "She set me up," I said. "My own manager. She planted evidence, altered logs, got me arrested in front of everyone. And she did it all with a smile." "Why?" "Because I tried to stop her from breaking the law. Because I went to HR. Because I wouldn't just shut up and let her take credit for my work." I set down the coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I thought doing the right thing mattered. Marcus sat down across from me. "So what are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. Something had shifted inside me during those hours at the police station. The fear and humiliation were still there, but underneath them was something harder. Colder. More focused. "I'm going to prove she did this," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows." Marcus nodded slowly. "Do you have evidence?" "Not yet. But I will." I stood up and walked to my home office, where my personal computer sat. Because I'm not the one who's been careless. She is. I spent the next 3 days going through every backup, every log file, every piece of data I'd saved on my personal drives over the past 6 years. I barely slept. Marcus brought me food, which I mostly forgot to eat. What I found was better than I'd hoped for. Our IT system automatically created snapshots every 6 hours, backups of all system activity that got stored on remote servers. Most people didn't even know they existed. I'd set them up years ago as a disaster recovery measure. Every login, every file access, every system change, it all left a digital fingerprint. I pulled up the logs from the day the laptop supposedly went missing. According to the equipment system, I'd signed out a storage room key at 2:15 p.m. But my actual location data from my building access card showed I was on the 3rd floor in a meeting room at that exact time. The meeting had been about the banking client software. I had calendar invites and email confirmations. Someone had forged the equipment log entry. And only 2 people had the administrative rights to do that, me and Melissa. Then I found something even better. At 2:12 p.m. that same day, just 3 minutes before my supposed equipment room visit, Melissa's admin account had accessed the logging system. The connection came from her office computer. I hired Daniel Reese on Tuesday morning. He was a lawyer who specialized in employment law and civil rights cases, recommended by Marcus's girlfriend who worked in corporate law. Daniel's office was small but organized, with shelves full of legal texts and framed degrees on the walls. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, I pulled out a flash drive. This is everything. System logs, access records, email backups, calendar data. All of it proves the timeline doesn't match what they claimed. He plugged the drive into his computer and spent 20 minutes reviewing the files, occasionally pulling up different windows to cross-reference information. Finally, he sat back and looked at me. "This isn't just wrong, Trent. This is entrapment. She deliberately created false evidence to frame you for a crime you didn't commit. Can we prove it?" I asked. "Yes. These logs are time-stamped and backed up on secure servers. They show she used her admin account to alter the equipment records at the exact time you were in a documented meeting." He smiled slightly. "This is actually better evidence than most cases I see. She made it easy because she didn't think you'd know how to find this stuff. So what happens now? Now we go on offense." Daniel filed a motion to dismiss the criminal charges the next day. He submitted everything: the system logs showing Melissa's access, my calendar records proving I was elsewhere, the Zoom meeting data with timestamps. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. I wore the only suit I owned and sat beside Daniel at a table in the courtroom. Across from us, the prosecutor looked uncomfortable, shuffling through papers. The judge reviewed the evidence Daniel had submitted, his expression growing more skeptical with each page. He looked up at the prosecutor. "Ms. Bailey, you've seen the defense's submission?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, standing up. "The state has reviewed the new evidence and has some concerns about the original allegations." "I would think so." The judge held up one of the printouts. "This system log shows that the equipment records were accessed and modified from the complainant's computer at the exact time the defendant was in a video conference with multiple witnesses." He looked directly at me. "Mr. Lawson, did you alter any equipment logs?" "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "And you have proof of your location at the time in question?" "Yes, sir. Building access records, calendar entries, and the video conference itself, which was recorded and saved." The judge turned back to the prosecutor. "Do you want to proceed with this case?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "The state moves to dismiss all charges, Your Honor." Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps with Daniel, feeling like I should be relieved. The charges were gone. My name was cleared legally. But I didn't feel free. I felt hollow. Melissa had destroyed my reputation. She'd made everyone at the company believe I was a thief. She'd humiliated me in front of people I'd worked with for years. And now she was still sitting at her desk, still getting her salary, still smiling. No apology. No consequences. Nothing. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, watching my face. "That this isn't over," I said quietly. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "We should talk about your options." We went to a coffee shop nearby. Daniel ordered us both coffee and pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "You have grounds for a civil lawsuit," he said. "Malicious prosecution, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. What she did to you goes way beyond a workplace dispute. Can we win?" I asked. "With this evidence?" "Yes. But it won't be quick or easy. She'll fight it. The company will fight it. You'll spend months, maybe over a year, reliving the worst experience of your life in depositions and hearings. What do you think it's worth? If we win." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You lost your job. Your reputation. Your sense of security." He looked at me directly. "What do you think that's worth?" I thought about it for 2 days. Marcus told me to let it go, to take the win and move on with my life. My girlfriend Emma said I should focus on finding a new job, not on revenge. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about something bigger. Melissa had almost destroyed my entire life because I'd tried to stop her from breaking the law. If I walked away now, she'd keep doing it. To other people. Other employees who tried to stand up for what was right. I called Daniel on Saturday morning. "Let's do it." "You're sure?" Yes. But I want to do this right. I want everything documented, every piece of evidence solid. I don't want her to be able to lie her way out of this. That's going to take time, Daniel warned. I've got time, I said. And I'm going to make sure everyone sees exactly who Melissa Crow really is. Over the next 6 weeks, we built the case methodically. Daniel subpoenaed records from Ravenholt Consulting, all of Melissa's emails, her system access logs, HR complaints. He interviewed former employees, people who'd left the company over the past 3 years. What we found was a pattern. I wasn't Melissa's first victim. I was just the latest. 3 former employees agreed to give statements. One was a woman named Angela who'd worked in HR before Timothy Burns. She'd been fired 2 years ago for performance issues, but her story sounded familiar. We met her at Daniel's office. She was nervous, twisting her hands together as she talked. Melissa didn't like that I questioned some of her decisions, Angela said. She'd submit expense reports that seemed inflated, business dinners that cost way too much, equipment purchases that didn't make sense. When I asked for receipts and documentation, she went to the CEO and said I was harassing her. What happened? Daniel asked. I got called in for a disciplinary meeting. They said I'd created a hostile work environment. I tried to explain, but nobody wanted to hear it. They offered me severance if I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement and leave quietly. She looked down. I needed the money. I had a mortgage. So I signed. The second person was Victor. A former IT manager who'd worked under Melissa before I got promoted. His story was different but just as damaging. She took credit for a major security upgrade I'd designed, he told us. When I confronted her privately, she denied it. Then she started writing me up for minor things, being 3 minutes late, leaving early once for a dentist appointment. She built a file on me until she had enough to justify firing me. The third witness broke down crying during her video call. Her name was Paula, and she'd been a project coordinator who'd reported to Melissa 3 years ago. She made my life a nightmare, Paula said, wiping her eyes. Constant criticism, impossible deadlines, blame for things that weren't my fault. I started having panic attacks. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot for an hour before work, trying to force myself to go inside. Did you report this to HR? Daniel asked gently. Yes. They did an investigation, talked to both of us. Melissa was so convincing. She had examples of my poor performance, emails I'd supposedly sent with mistakes in them. I didn't find out until later that she'd altered some of them, changed words to make me look incompetent. How did you find out? I asked. A coworker sent me the original email thread after I'd left. Showed me what I'd actually written versus what Melissa had submitted to HR. But by then I'd already resigned. I couldn't afford a lawyer, and I just wanted it to be over. After the call ended, Daniel and I sat in silence for a moment. He closed his laptop and looked at me. She's done this before, I said quietly. Multiple times. She has a system. Yes, Daniel agreed. And now we can prove it. Daniel filed the lawsuit the following Monday. The complaint was 32 pages long, detailing everything, the false accusations, the planted evidence, the altered logs, the pattern of abuse toward other employees. We asked for damages totaling $1.5 million. We didn't announce it publicly. Didn't send out a press release. But word spread fast anyway. 2 days later, I got a call from Jessica, one of my former coworkers from the IT department. She spoke quietly, like she was worried about being overheard. Trent, is it true? Did you really sue Melissa? Yes, I said. Everyone's talking about it. HR called an emergency meeting. They're saying it's just a disgruntled employee making false accusations, but nobody really believes that anymore. She paused. Some people are saying they always thought something was off about how you got arrested. What about Melissa? I asked. She's acting like everything's fine. Still coming to work, still running meetings. But she looks stressed. She snapped at Chad yesterday over something minor, which she never does in public. More calls came over the next week. Former co-workers reaching out, some apologizing for believing the worst about me, others asking if what they'd heard about the lawsuit was true. A few offered to be witnesses if we needed them. The company's executives were panicking behind the scenes. Daniel heard from their legal team, they wanted to meet, to discuss resolving this matter privately. The settlement talks went nowhere. The company's lawyers offered me 6 months of salary and a neutral reference if I drop the lawsuit and sign an NDA. They're trying to make this go away quietly, Daniel told me after the meeting. Standard playbook. Pay just enough to avoid trial, keep everything confidential. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them we're not interested. This isn't about money, it's about accountability. While the lawyers negotiated, the situation at Ravenholt Consulting kept deteriorating. Jessica called me again to report that the board of directors had placed Melissa on administrative leave, pending an internal review. She came in yesterday morning and HR met her at the door, Jessica said. Walked her to her office, watched her pack her stuff, then escorted her out of the building. She tried to act like it was nothing, but everyone could tell she was freaking out. Did she say anything? I asked. She sent an email to the whole department before she left. Said she was taking a brief leave to focus on her health, and she'd be back stronger than ever. But nobody believes that. People are starting to talk openly about how she treated them. It's like everyone was afraid to say anything before, but now it's all coming out. I felt a small sense of satisfaction hearing that, but I wanted more. I wanted one specific moment. That moment came 3 weeks later. I was at home, working on applications for new jobs, when Daniel called. Melissa's back in the office today, he said. I just got word from my contact at the company. She's apparently trying to act like everything's normal, showing up for work like the investigation never happened. Are they letting her stay? I asked. For now. But I have something for you. The process server is delivering our lawsuit papers today. I thought you might want to know when. He gave me the timing. My hand started shaking slightly as I wrote it down. This was it. The moment I'd been working toward for months. I drove to the business park where Ravenholt had their offices. Parked across the street where I could see the main entrance. At 10:15 a.m., I watched a courier walk into the building carrying a large manila envelope. I waited, checking my watch every 30 seconds. At 10:22, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, delivered. I sat there for another 10 minutes, imagining what was happening inside. Then people started emerging from the building, heading to early lunch, taking phone calls outside. Through the glass doors, I could see movement, people walking quickly, gathering in small groups. Something had happened. The news was spreading. Jessica called me that afternoon. She was whispering, clearly trying not to be overheard. Trent, oh my God. A courier showed up and gave Melissa this huge envelope right in front of everyone. She opened it at her desk and just froze. Completely froze. Her face went white. What happened then? I asked. She just sat there staring at the papers for like 10 minutes. People were walking by, trying to see what was wrong, but she didn't move. Didn't say anything. Then she suddenly stood up, grabbed her purse and coat, and walked straight out of the building without saying a word to anyone. Did anyone try to stop her? No. I think people were too shocked. Chad tried to follow her, but she was already in her car. Jessica paused. What was in that envelope? The lawsuit. Official notice that she's being sued for what she did to me. How much? $1.5 million. Jessica let out a low whistle. Everyone's going crazy here. HR is in emergency meetings. The CEO showed up, which never happens. And people are talking openly now about all the stuff Melissa's done. It's like the dam broke. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because it was over, it wasn't. But because Melissa finally understood what it felt like to have your life turned upside down in front of everyone you work with. The lawsuit dragged on for 8 months. Depositions, document reviews, mediation sessions that went nowhere. Melissa hired an expensive attorney who tried every tactic to get the case dismissed, claiming I had no evidence, that I was a bitter employee making false accusations, that everything she'd done was within her rights as a manager. But we had the logs. The witnesses. The pattern of behavior. Every time her lawyer tried to attack our case, Daniel would produce another piece of evidence that backed up our claims. In March, right before the trial was scheduled to begin, I got a call from Daniel. They want to settle, he said. Full amount. $1.5 million. They'll admit no wrongdoing publicly, but they're willing to issue a formal apology to you and clear your employment record completely. What about Melissa? I asked. She's already gone. Resigned 2 weeks ago. From what I hear, she can't find work anywhere in the industry. Word got around about the lawsuit and the pattern of abuse. Nobody wants to hire someone with that kind of baggage. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to take her to trial, to make her sit there while witness after witness described what she'd done. But another part of me just wanted this to be over. Take the deal, I said finally. The settlement money came through 6 weeks later. After legal fees and taxes, I cleared just under $900,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. I used part of it to start my own cybersecurity consulting firm. Small at first, just me and 2 contractors. But I had a specific mission. I wanted to help companies build better IT security while treating their employees fairly. I hired Paula first, the woman who'd cried during her video interview. Then Victor. Then 3 other people who'd been pushed out of jobs by managers who abused their power. People who'd been told they weren't good enough, who'd been set up to fail, who'd had their confidence destroyed by bosses who saw them as disposable. My company's policies were simple: clear documentation for everything, transparent decision-making, and zero tolerance for managers who bullied their teams. If someone had a complaint, it got investigated properly, not swept under the rug to protect the person in charge. I don't hate Melissa anymore. Honestly, I barely think about her. But she taught me something valuable: silence protects the wrong people. When you see something wrong, you have to speak up, even when it's scary. Even when it costs you. And every time I hire someone who's been humiliated or pushed out of a job unfairly, which happens more often than people realize, I think about that day she smirked while I was being handcuffed. Then I smile, because I know something she never learned: the system doesn't always work fast, but sometimes, eventually, it works for the people who refuse to give up.